Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we dive into the content, let me cover a few housekeeping items. So first, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools that you can use. Please note that all those engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can also expand your presentation area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you happen to have any audio or video issues, you can find answers to some common technical issues located in the help widget at the bottom of your screen. Please note that we have a resource list available on the side of the presentation area, where you can find a copy of today's slide deck and additional help materials. So have a look and download everything that you may find useful. Lastly, please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be sent via the email that you registered with. And lastly, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We'll have a short Q&A session at the end where we'll select some questions coming from the audience, but we're also here to answer you one-on-one via the chat. So don't be shy and don't hesitate to reach out. And in case we run out of time or we didn't manage to answer your question, we'll make sure to follow up later by email. And after this quick introduction, let me introduce you to our speakers. So today the webinar will be co-hosted by subject matter experts from both Jama Software and OpsHub. So from Jama Software, we'll have Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy is VP of Product Management at Jama. He oversees Jama's product strategy and roadmap, as well as product design and user experience. He has over 15 experience in leading enterprise product management teams. And throughout that time, he has worked with customers in various industries. That includes automotive, semiconductor, aerospace defense, medical devices, industrial manufacturing, and consumer goods, consumer products, sorry. On the OpsHub side, we will have Paul Culling. Paul is VP of Alliances at OpsHub, and he and his team work closely to support Jama Software as a strategic partner and their end customer integration needs. Paul has spent the past 15 years of his career in various leadership positions within the ALM and DevOps space at companies delivering both tooling and digital transformation services. And lastly, we will also have Aparna Garg. Aparna is a senior product owner at OpsHub. She has been with OpsHub for 12 years and has held several senior roles within product engineering and product management. Aparna's expertise lies in integration architecture, product design, and customer management. So then now that you know a little bit more about our speakers, I'm going to hand it over to Paul, who will walk you through today's agenda.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, just before we get to the agenda, we'll talk a little bit about Jama and OpsHub. So on your screen, you'll see some descriptions about the two companies, but really OpsHub and Jama have built a deep and strategic partnership over the past 5 years, working together to help drive value for customers looking to integrate sort of the best of breed federated tool chains. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Jama and OpsHub work really closely from a product management, sales, and customer support perspective. So for the agenda, today's webinar will focus on the integration of multi-tool environments. We'll touch on modern best-of-breed tool chains that are so common throughout software development organizations. We'll speak about the challenges of manual integration and how manual or multiple point-to-point integrations really aren't that viable as a long-term solution. We'll talk about the value of utilizing an integration platform to provide a scalable and extendable integration solution that can adapt to changing tool environment, or even how those tools are used within your organization. We'll then speak about some things you should think about when designing your integration strategy and how you can use that integration strategy to optimize your value stream from ideation through the delivery of value to your end customers. We'll finish off the webinar with a demo of Jama Connect integrated with multiple tools, including Jira, Azure DevOps, and Focus ALM. Jeremy?
Thanks, Paul. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a view here of today's multi-tool IT landscape. and kind of what that typically is comprised of in the product development sphere. Typically, what we see today are multiple best-of-breed tools. A lot of organizations have specific teams with a very specific objective. It might be dedicated and very specific, very bespoke testing solutions for different teams, different risk management solutions, and things that really need to be tailored to make sure that the organization is unlocking value. And so we see this a lot in most organizations, that they're really looking at best of breed tools, not a broad suite that's comprised in a huge monolith, to make sure that the organizations tend to be fairly agile and fairly quick to respond based on the specific role in the value stream. What that does tend to lead to, though, is data can get locked in silos across those tools. When you have teams working in these bespoke and very specific best of breed tools, that data can be siloed, can be difficult to share that information, and so you get fragmented value streams, these different roles across the organization that are adding value to the product development efforts. Those roles and those functions and those work streams can become highly fragmented. What we also see is a tendency for organizations more and more to shrink release cycles. Organizations are trying to be as agile as possible, trying to move quickly, trying to get product to market, trying to innovate as quickly as possible. And so we tend to see that shrinking release cycles, shrinking the development process to try to get products to market as quickly as possible. And we'll talk about some of the ramifications of that here in a moment. What we're also seeing, of course, is a continued reliance on remote or distributed teams across geographies. The product development world, the world in its entirety, has really gone through a transformation over the last 15, 18 months here. And even though we're seeing more organizations start to pull their folks back into an office setting, at least in part, we still have organizations, of course, that have global teams, have teams that are performing different functions, different parts of the value stream. And so keeping those folks connected is continuing to be extremely important. And of course, we foresee that to be an ongoing concern in the future. So when we think about this, this accelerated delivery cadence, it really demands a very dynamic and responsive ecosystem. When you have lack of visibility, when you have data that's potentially locked up in these different silos across the organization, you have a lack of broad visibility. You have a challenge with collaboration. You're not getting the best input. You're not getting the best insight from all of the teams, from all of the data that you have in your team. And when you have to actively source that information, when you have to actively put energy into collaboration rather than putting it in as part of the core system that you work within, it really does impact productivity significantly. The next impact, of course, is poor traceability. So when you have this disparate data, you're trying to move quickly, you may have gaps in traceability. You may have gaps in connecting requirements to test risk information. Your cost for managing governance, managing compliance goes up if you're having to fill that information maybe on the back end of the process rather than maintaining that connectivity, making sure that the verification and validation process is sound throughout the development lifecycle. And that also introduced quite a bit of risk. If you're doing a lot of that work at the back end, that's a tremendous amount of risk of things being missed, things going too far down the development cycle before they can be corrected. and that definitely leads to a lot of risk. And what that can lead to is these information gaps, quality issues, potentially product delays, rework, things like that. And so when you have this accelerated delivery cadence, filling in those gaps at the back end becomes much, much more challenging than they might have been in a more methodical, deliberate cadence. You also have this gap in decision making, where you don't have that real-time information, you don't have those points of data connected, you're not able to really get accurate real-time assessment of where things are at in your product development lifecycle. You're maybe making decisions on data that's not timely, that's not accurate, and it increases the risk, of course, of making poor decisions based on incorrect or outdated data. The last thing that tends to come into play here is manual methods. This is something that has been in play for many organizations. For most organizations, it probably still has some level of play. Trying to get data between systems, sharing things via email and shared document management systems and things like that tends to increase the chances of error, the chances of gaps, and certainly is another area which causes a great deal of additional time and additional effort to maintain. And so when we think about the manual piece in a little bit deeper, if you're trying to maintain this data connection between different best-of-breed tools in the ecosystem, it's tremendously expensive on the organization. And that's from a direct cost and also from an indirect cost standpoint. So it's certainly a huge drain on human capital on the workforce to try to pull all of those pieces together. When you look at the potential impact from a risk standpoint and some of those indirect costs, that expense on direct management can really go up exponentially. Again, it's inaccurate and typically error prone. Whenever you're relying on human intervention as a regular part of your process, regardless of the accuracy, regardless of the processes you put in place, there's still an opportunity, there's still a potential for human error. And so you have that, you always have that risk if you're overly reliant on manual information sharing between groups in your product development lifecycle. The last thing is it really impacts velocity. And responsiveness. If the ultimate goal is to accelerate a highly quality-centric product development lifecycle, accelerate time to market, having to fill this information in manually is very much headwind on the organization, and it really inhibits the ability to respond quickly, to pivot. If those kinds of things are required to really maintain an agile focus on the organization. So if we look at the flip side of that, Paul's going to take us through the value of a more tightly integrated solution fabric.
Thanks, Jeremy. So we've used this term best of breed tools quite a few times already. And over the last 15 years or so, they've become ubiquitous throughout development, and the autonomy of teams and business units to decide which tools they should use to perform their work has become common. But it's made it challenging to keep alignment between business goals, development, quality. This impacts governance and increases compliance risks, as Jeremy's talked about, particularly for those in highly regulated environments. While integration of a federated tool chain provides visibility across the development lifecycle, value stream, however you view that, an equally important aspect and one that provides tremendous value for the teams is the real-time collaboration from within the development tools themselves. This extends to the organization as well, because when Jeremy talked about velocity and slowing things down through manual integration or no integration. And really what organizations need is an increase in velocity of decision making. And that's this integration, the ability to integrate the tools and get the proper information in the hands of each individual team member really help that. So this not only provides information and context within the tool of a given team's choice, but it also contains that data and knowledge within the development environment instead of out in a random spreadsheet or Slack or Teams message chain. So integrating your tool chain allows your organization to fully leverage those best of breed tools. When we talk about things to think about when designing your integration strategy, there's a number of things that may seem obvious here, but really identifying your business need and value, what you'll get out of this integration. A really important step is defining your current process and what your desired process will look like, because that will shape how you want to put get these tools integrated together. Another common thing is identifying the disparities between the different tools, the data modeling or how those tools are using that data, so you can make a plan about that, about bridging those. And then being able to configure that integration, test it potentially in a testing environment, and then deploying it to production. So that's another benefit to using sort of a integration platform like OpsHub Integration Manager, where you can actually configure the integration the way that you need it, your particular organization, and be able to inspect and adapt over time and how those integrations work. Building manual processes or multiple point-to-point integration generally is a type of integration that is designed and built with a single point in time's reference to what is available and what is needed. Building it around an integration fabric allows you to modify that over time as you modify how you're using your tools. Jeremy?
Thanks, Paul. And so when you have that fabric, and as an example, when you look at Jama Connect in an integration with and through the OpsHub Integration Manager, you get that full value stream visibility, accurate compliance and full traceability, and as Paul touched on, that real-time governance and collaboration. And this shows on the right a little bit of how we integrate those different points into Jama Connect, from requirements management, application lifecycle management, quality management, and into project and portfolio management. Typically, we tend to integrate with test management, and the project and portfolio management tends to be the most common. We do, although at times, integrate certainly in other requirements management tools. That tends to be integration with things like Enterprise Architect, for example, where folks are doing modeling and things like that. And this view gives you a little bit of a snapshot. We're certainly not going to go through all of these available endpoints. But this gives you an example of the different tools that Jama Connect can integrate with. And this really allows, this really shows, and we'll talk about it here in a moment, some of the building blocks that customers and organizations can go through. Starting small tends to be a pretty important component, and building up integrations over time. We've touched on it a few times. I think Paul touched on it most recently just a moment ago. It's much more efficient using an integration hub to bring all of these pieces together than trying to manage a number of ad hoc point-to-point integrations. That tends to be just one step above manual because it tends to be fairly time-consuming. And so having a hub solution like this that can grow and adapt as your organization does, as you bring on new tools, or maybe retire and replace different tools and things like that. It's really, really important to look at this challenge more holistically to really derive the level of value out of the tool chain that you're looking for. And with that, I'm going to ask Paul to go into our integration use case before we get into the demo itself.
Thanks, Jeremy. So in the demo today, we're going to integrate Jama Connect with Focus ALM from a testing perspective, Jira, and Azure DevOps. And in our make-believe scenario here, we've got Jira development team working in a Java environment and Azure DevOps in a .NET environment. And so we'll go through kind of the requirement collaboration to show a bit of the traceability and how those work together. So the first step will be requirement refinement and elaboration. So we've got, features being created. We'll go through requirement decomposition, so breaking those features down, and then requirement execution and implementation. So on here, this is just a high-level overview of sort of like logical activities of each individual user of the different systems. So we've got a product manager who's creating features and outlining those. We've got a software engineer working on a Java project. We've got a software engineer in a .NET project, and then we've got a quality engineer doing some testing. And so any box that you see in this slide and the next ones that are sort of a colored outline, these are activities or actions associated with those users. So this slide gets a little crazy here, but basically what we're showing is you've got a product manager who creates a couple of features, one feature for our Java team and one feature for our .NET team. We'll show how that each of the Jira team and the Azure DevOps team has clarifying questions about that feature, which then gets synced automatically back to the product manager. And then we go on down the line there. So anything in sort of the shaded box is an automated system, it automatically coming over, so that feature one automatically comes over. The Jira engineer sees it, thinks about it, adds his clarifying question as he's thinking about breaking it down, and so on. Next slide. So again, this is, just showing how, you've got feature one, it's been confirmed, the questions have been answered, the Jira and Azure DevOps engineers create their user stories, and the quality engineer also has full visibility into that feature and the user stories for both the Java team and the .NET team, and are able to create their integrated test cases. And finally, we've got the test cases passing. It heads over to the engineering team. They can mark their features as closed, automatically heads over to the product management. And in each of these tools, you got full visibility of everything that happens from the feature creation all the way through to testing and closing that feature. So with this, I'll pass it over to Aparna, and she will provide our demo for the day.
Thanks, Paul. We'll now move towards the demo where we will see how Observe enables requirement collaboration and traceability in a multi-tool ecosystem where Jama is used for requirements management. Let's get started with demo. So we'll begin from Jama, where an epic already exists. Product team will now be breaking this epic into features, with some features moving to Jira, as those features need to be developed in Jama, and some other features will move to Azure DevOps, as those belongs to .NET team. All the features will go to Focus ALM, because that is a QA tool being used to perform all the testing. Okay, so let's get started, and I will now break this epic into features. I'll create first feature. We'll start filling details in this feature. We'll give it a title. It's basically the ability is required to edit customer information via web portal. We'll fill more details through description. We'll also attach an image so teams can refer. And because this ability is required from web portal, which is being done in Java by this organization, will select Java team over here and save and close it. Similarly, we will add one more feature. This would go to .NET team, which is Azure DevOps. Again, we will start giving the details. We'll give it a name. This is again, the similar feature is required, but for the desktop app, which is developed in Visual Studio in .NET. We'll add some more details in description, and we'll select .NET team over here. So this breaks our epic into two features. One goes to Java team, which is Jira, and one will go to .NET team, which is ADO. So let's go to Jira to see this feature over there. I will refresh it to see if the feature is synced. So here we have our feature, which is editing the customer information via web portal. We have all the details as we filled in Java. There's title, there's description, there is image. Now let's go to Azure DevOps. There we should have our second feature, which was editing the customer information via desktop portal. Again, we will drill down, and again here all the required details are there. There is title, there is description. We also have Jama feature ID and a direct URL. So if we click on this URL, it will directly take us to Jama feature. Let's now go to Micro Focus ALM. So here we have both the features. QA team looks at both the features, and they have a question for the feature required in desktop app, which is .NET. They would come here and add a comment. So they want to know what are the prerequisites required to configure the desktop app, and they would save the comment. This comment would be visible in Azure DevOps, which is the .NET team is using, and in Jama. So the teams can collaborate three ways. It's not that just QA team is collaborating with requirements team and development team is collaborating with the requirements team separately. All the three teams are in sync for this given feature. Meanwhile, QA team was working on the features to come up with test plan. Development team in Azure DevOps was also started understanding the feature. So before we add a comment over here, let me refresh this to see if the comment from Micro Focus ALM is synced here. So here is the comment that we added from Micro Focus ALM. .NET team is also done looking at the feature, and they have some additional questions. They would also add here a comment, which would again get synced to Jama and Micro Focus ALM. Let's go to Jama to see if the comment is synced over here. We'll click on the desktop app feature. So here we have both the comments. This is a comment that we added from Azure DevOps, which are the versions in which the support is required. And the second comment we added from Micro Focus ALM. The product team will look at both the comments, and they would reply back by adding another comment. And this would integrate back to Azure DevOps and Micro Focus ALM. So this way, we saw how different teams using three different tools collaborated near to real time. So this comment will be available back in ADO and Micro Focus ALM. Let's just quickly go and check in ADO if the comment is there. Okay, so here is our comment that we added from Jira. Now, similar process is happening on the other side, which is the Java shop. So here also Java developers or Java team started looking at the feature, they have certain questions that they would be adding as comments. We'll add a comment over here. So they want to know if user can edit their password from profile page. We'll go back to Jama. Again, in Jama, the team can enable the native notifications such that they get an email whenever there is an update on the feature. I'll just refresh it to see if the comment is there or not. And here is the comment that Java team added. Again, product team will address the questions. They would add a comment. This comment will flow to Jira, just like we saw for Azure DevOps and Focus ALM. So let's go to Jira and check quickly. So here Jira team, they have answer to the question they asked within their own tool without exchanging any email or without stepping out of the tool they are using. This completes our first phase of the demo, which is requirement refinement. When there are multiple teams working across multiple tools, we will now move towards our second phase. In this phase, both the development teams, Java and .NET team, they will start working on the feature. They would break the feature into user stories. In Focus ALM, QA team will start writing test cases for each of the user stories. And finally, they would execute the test case. The results would be synced to all to Jama and other tools. And at the end, all the user stories and features would be closed. So let's get started with second phase. We'll start from Jira, where Java team now break the feature into user stories. The Java team will create first user story. They will give it a description, and they would link it to the feature whose ID is demo 145 and save this. Similarly, they would create one more user story. Again, give this a description and link it to the feature. The feature will have two stories under it. Both the stories will be integrated to Jama. So the requirements team or the product team gets complete visibility into the user story breakdown that is happening. So here we have both the stories that were created in Jira. Now, same process is being done by .NET team. They would break their feature into user stories. Again, here we will give it a title, add some more details to the story and an image to it as to what the page would look like on the desktop app, and team would go ahead and save it. Similarly, we will create one more story, give it a title and fill some more details in description. So here also feature is divided in two stories. So again, both these stories will be integrated to Jama. And let's refresh the view here to see if the stories are already created. Okay, so here we have both the stories. Now we will go to Micro Focus ALM. Here we would have all the stories from both the features. So QA team can start writing test cases. So here are two stories for desktop app, which .NET team added. And then here are two stories from for web portal feature, which was added by Java team in Jira. We would now go to test plan module in Micro Focus ALM and start writing test cases. So here, while development team is working on developing user stories, QA team has already started writing the test cases. They're giving it a name, some description, and would save basic details. We would now go and add test steps to it. So let's add our first test step. We gave it a description. Now we are adding expected result, which is if user clicks on update profile, then they should be taken to update profile page. I'll save it. We'll add one more test step. So here QA team needs to test that a user is not entering too many characters in the name field. They enter the expected result and save it. QA team will link the user story with test case. Now, similarly, we will add one more test case. It's basically if the information is updated from desktop app, then it should be visible from web portal too. We'll give it same description. And again, here we will go and add test steps. So I would be adding just one test step this time. And similarly, we will link it to the user story. Okay, so here we have two test cases added against the user story under web portal. Now we will add the test case for .NET feature also. Again, we will give it a name. So .NET for the QA team is trying to test that email format is appropriate. Again, here they would go and add steps. Now they would fill description, expected result, and save it. Now this time they will link it to a .NET feature, which is under desktop app. Okay, so looking at the time, we'll just create few test cases just to show that how the test traceability can also be taken to Jama, giving requirement stream full visibility into QA status and QA health. Now let's go to Jama to see the test cases information synced over here. Okay, so here is the expanded hierarchy. And like there is the whole from top to bottom, whole hierarchy is visible to requirements team. We initially started with this epic in Jama. Underneath, there is this underneath requirements team created the feature, which was then broken down into user stories and respective tool used by development teams. And under this user story, we have both the test cases that were added in Micro Focus ALM. So if you look at the first test case, here we have both the steps that we added. And then again, for the desktop app feature, for one of the user story, we added one test case, which is again here with all the details. So now what we will do is we will go and mark all the user stories and feature completed. So Java team would mark stories as done in their tool. And they would close the feature, marking it as done. And similarly in ADO, team will close both the stories and the feature. Okay, so we'll mark this one closed and we'll close the next one too. Team will close the feature also. Now in QA team will see that all the user stories are completed. They would go and execute the test plan. And for demo purpose, we will set status to passed for all the test cases. Now, if you go back to Jama, here requirements team will have complete visibility into updated development status and updated QA status. So if you begin with feature, this is transition to done. Moving to user story, it is transition to completed. And if you look at test case, then this is marked as passed. Here again, if we go to second feature, this is also transition to done. The user stories from ADO are also transition to completed, and the test case is marked as passed. This completes the demo. I will now request Jeremy to walk through the key takeaways.
Great, thanks, Aparna. Really appreciate that demo. So I'm going to close the presentation here talking about a few of the key takeaways. And really, I think this snapshot is the biggest thing to take away from this session today. So Jama Connect with the Ops Hub integration manager really is a very strong, sustainable way to enhance transparency, collaboration, and traceability. Bringing all that data together, bringing the teams together, it really is a strong foundation for better compliance, better quality, better governance, and bringing the teams together, bringing that high level of collaboration, doing that work very efficiently. That is absolutely the best way to optimize your product development processes. It's the best way to maintain agility. It's the best way to allow different members of your team to utilize the tools that unlock the most value for them but also integrate all of that information. So as a high level organization, the key decision makers have the ability to see across the product development lifecycle and see that very much in real time, and very much drive the kind of analytics and compliance reporting that are required. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Marie, and she'll take us through any questions that we've received here during the session.
Yes, thank you, Paul, Jeremy, and Aparna for sharing with us your inputs. Indeed, we have time to answer a few questions that we received via the chat with the time that we have left. So I'm going to dive into it right now. So first questions for our speakers. Can I do my compliance reporting out of Jama, even though my dev team is using Jira and the quality team is using Focus ALM?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I'll take that, Marie. They absolutely can, and that's a very common scenario with our customers today. Most of our customers drive the central requirements authoring. They pull in test information, they pull in risk information directly into the tool, and different task-based information and things like that. But Jama Connect itself tends to be where that intersection happens, where that traceability happens. So driving compliance reporting and things like that is absolutely a central part of what Jama Connect does, and it's very common for us to integrate that information to drive reporting, to drive the manufacturing kickoff process and different things like that.
Great, thank you. I have a second question regarding trial. So can we try the thing with our systems before buying the solution?
Yeah, I'll jump on that, Marie. So yes, we provide no and low cost proof of concept trials within customer environments, so we can actually help you get that set up, have it working in your system, from a simple use case through to sort of what you'll want as your production scenario. So yeah, no and low cost proof of concept trials, no problem.
Great, thank you. Third question, so do you support integration with on-premises Jama?
Yeah, actually we do. We have customers that use that. The integration with the on-premise Jama would look exactly as we showed it in the demo with the cloud version of Jama we used for the demo.
Perfect, thank you. Another question also on on-premise and cloud. So we have a mixture of on-premise and cloud tools. Does that make a difference?
No, actually, it won't matter in terms of integration functionality. The difference really is in the deployment option you choose for OpsHub. So OpsHub can be deployed on-premise or it can be deployed in the cloud. If any of the tools you're integrating are on-premise, we generally recommend that OpsHub is installed on-premise. It just reduces the amount of in and out of your firewall that needs to happen. So if you choose to have OpsHub hosted in the cloud and have on-premise applications you're integrating, there'll be additional security precautions that must be made to ensure or to secure the environment. But we have lots of customers that choose this scenario and are perfectly successful in doing so. But our suggestion is always to install it locally if you have any on-premise applications you're integrating.
Perfect, thank you. So I keep going with the questions. Does it matter if Jira is in the cloud or on-site?
From the only difference really that we can think of would be around user permissions required for the sync user. So each within the OpsHub system, we need a user for each system, like the Jira user for sync. And with recent changes to the API done for GDPR, by default, Jira users' email IDs and usernames aren't accessible through the API. So there's some things there, but otherwise the integration will work just the same for Jira Cloud or Jira on-prem.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Another question actually around Jira. So we have teams that use Jira differently, like different field values or different status fields. Does that matter?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one, Paul. I'll give you a little break here. So yeah, the great thing about OpsHub is that it has a smart mapping user interface that actually allows organizations and users to map systems with different field values or statuses, status workflows. So that's another great advantage to using OpsHub rather than point to point and some of these other things, is that smart interface that can handle that really, really well.
Okay, perfect. And I think we're gonna finish this discussion with this last question. We have multiple instances of Jira. Can the integrations work with a single instance of Jama?
Yeah, it absolutely can. And that actually tends to be fairly common. It's treated within OpsHub as a kind of a multi-system integration. It certainly is something, though, that we'd want to scope out, make sure that we have the different dimensions are modeled properly, and the way things are synced, the way conflicts are handled, and some of those kinds of things. So needs a little bit maybe a front end work just on the design and scoping side, but as far as execution and being able to manage it within the tool and within a single instance of Jama, that's absolutely something that can be handled, and we've done that fairly often with customers.
Fantastic, thank you, Jeremy. So yeah, it's time to wrap up for us. So thank you again to our speakers, and thank you to our audience for your attention and for your participation in the Q&A. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up quickly by email in the coming days. As a reminder, you will also receive a recording and additional help materials via the email you registered with. Right after this presentation, you will also have a short survey popping up on your desktop. So please share with us your feedback or any additional questions that you might have, and we'll make sure to follow up. And thank you very much, and take care.